Hey, what's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Jordan Tatum 3. Let's get into them. So I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like it has not been that long at all since the Tatum 2s were a new drop. So it's interesting that we're getting these, so quick. So starting off in the uppers, these are really interesting to look at. You've got really tight textile weaving, kind of paneled and stitched together, which, yeah, it does make it feel pretty darn substantial, although the shoe is not super heavy, to be honest. You do get one real kind of open breathing pore on the medial side of the forefoot, kind of like right where the big toe is. Look at this thing on the breathability test. They did heat up 105.4 degrees. Still not terrible by any means for how substantial these uppers are. The tongue breathes okay. There actually is 2 layers of padding there. It actually does get pretty thick toward the more proximal aspect of the tongue where it contacts your ankle. In terms of lockdown on that, really 0 heel slippage right off the jump, which is really nice to see. So, the lockdown is really good. The lace line's reinforced with some waxy reinforcement. Look at this on the breathability mapping, though. Tells a little bit of a different story. Fog is kind of getting out of the sides of the tongue. This tongue is actually pretty aggressively gusseted, which is great. That adds lockdown. And then after a little bit, you do start to see fog come out of that pore, that big kind of patch here in the forefoot. So it seems like it does much better with expelling heat versus moisture. I think these will trap more moisture than they do heat, especially because of, like I said, it's really substantial backing there on the underside. There's a lot of stitching. It's just, like I said, very, very substantial. That does aid in containment. The containment on these is, like I said, really outsized for, I would say, the weight of these. Now look at this thing on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, and woof, the burr just kind of pummels right through this. There is some rubber reinforcement along that, which we'll talk about in a second, but kind of depends on where you slide and drag these. It just seems like there's a lot of spots for this to kind of catch. So if you're on indoor courts, I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal, although if you just look at I know this is in the midsole section, but I was already starting to wear down the Cushlon, the exposed Cushlon on these, just from me sliding and dragging on these. And I've only had these for a few days, and I've already started to do that. So to me, these are not outdoor shoes, and if you're sliding and dragging at all, I think there's going to be some issues maybe in the midsole and outsole section, not to mention the uppers. All right, but getting into the midsole, I think this can be described in 2 words: rubber gaskets. That's what is really holding the midsole together. It's really odd. So it is a full bed of Cushlon 3.0. Now, in any other case, I would say that's fantastic. I love Cushlon 3.0. I just like Cushlon in general. I think you get a lot of the best aspects of EVA and like some more eTPU lightweight foams. I think that rubberized EVA, it is a really nice combination, except in these, right? So you do get what appears to be a Zoom turbo unit in the forefoot. It does have indentations, for break points in there. And it is molded, which is really nice. So you do have like a nice molded longitudinal arch swooping down there, under your metatarsal bases into the shafts of the metatarsal. So that's nice. The thing is, though, there's no just straight shank. What there is there are these rubber gaskets on the lateral side, which they're substantial. And then on the medial side, you have what looks to be the same configuration as on the Tatum 2, just none of that, felt or bunting or padding on there. It's just the straight up, really, really thick rubber containment on the inside. And when I took it out of the box, I said, this could be really interesting because you could get some really good arch support from this. What ends up happening is you just end up feeling these gaskets through the Cushlon. And so it becomes really, really annoying. It creates these hot spots underneath, number one, your lateral foot, underneath your 5th metatarsal base. Now, for people that get irritation there already, that's going to really be a problem. But because the Cushlon is so light and airy, those rubber gaskets just create these stress risers in there. Now, you look at this thing on the bounce height test, speaking of that Cushlon, you get 37 centimeters in the rear foot, 45 in the forefoot. So, you are getting some pop out of this midsole. And in any other case, I would say this is really kind of like a decent setup because honestly, you're getting containment of the foam, right? And all this rubber. You can make shanks out of rubber, right? I wouldn't consider that quote unquote a rigid shank, but it will, hold it together. It'll contain that foam a little bit better, except in this case, like I said, it's just, the foam is so soft. It's just creating stress risers. So you don't even really feel the pop in them because it's just uncomfortable underfoot. Every time you come down on them, you're basically just feeling that little rail under the side of your foot and under the medial side of your foot. At least I was. And if you're a flatter footed person, you're going to feel it more on the inside. If you're a higher arch person, you're going to feel it more on the outside. So just take that into consideration. In the fit section, we'll talk about how orthotics can help this, but it better be a certain type of orthotic or it's still just going to annoy you. And speaking of foam and shank setups, I'm sure you've seen them, and I've been talking about them recently, but the release of my first sport and recovery slide is coming up imminently. You can get information right now at footdoctorzach.com/sando. I'll leave a link in the description below, and you can actually join the list, to be notified when they first drop. But getting into the outsole tread, once again, confusion and bewilderment. It is just a very gentle wave pattern going throughout the entire shoe, much more linear as you get into the rear foot, and it's broken up with this, giant outcropping of Cushlon. I wouldn't say an outcropping of Cushlon, but just exposed Cushlon. So what happens is, so on the grip test ramp, slips at 36 degrees, which isn't really anything special. I mean, it's okay. It's in the middle of the road. But when I have these on the viewing box, usually the viewing box is the most slippery thing in here between my hardwood, my faux hardwood, and then the viewing box. And this guy was actually feeling decent on the viewing box, so I had some high hopes for these. And then I put them on court, and then they were really good at certain times and then horrible at others. And it seemed like when I was catching some of these, like the harder rubber gasket type material on it, would grab. And then if I would get it really up on my tiptoes, then it would grab. Plus, then it was holding on to dust really bad. So it was just inconsistent, right? The rubber on it, the durometer of the clear rubber comes in at 19.5, then 24.5 on the dyed rubber, on that white rubber. But the thing is, though, you look at the outsole durability test on these things, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, the harder rubber, the burr just pummeled right through it, whereas the clear rubber, about a millimeter of damage on it. So it's really, like I said, confusion and bewilderment. Look at these things on the speed ratio. They do come in at 3.01 because, it bounces pretty good. It's a bottom light shoe. The problem is not even stopping power, because I could kind of, they weren't slipping out completely underneath me, so I could kind of deal with the sliding. It was the push off. Like, I was slipping at push off. That's where I was having the biggest issue. So push off power in these things, I mean, you better keep them clean or have some grip spray on something just to give you a more confident push. After that, I'd say, yeah, they're fine because, like I said, bottom light, Cushlon 3.0 is great, that the 4-foot zoom unit is nice. So yeah, I mean, while they're new, yeah, they're going to be pretty quick, speedy shoes, except that it's just getting off the blocks and then stopping. Those are the issues. Did not feel any issues in terms of side-to-side stability or containment. Those gaskets on the side, they do create kind of like a nice, it's flexible, but it is sturdy in terms of side-to-side movement. So I didn't feel unstable whatsoever, plus the profile of the shoe being so flat on the ground. That is nice. It's just that, yeah, you can get speed in them, but it better be a super tacky court or a really gritty outdoor court to get any grabbing power. And for an outdoor court, like I said, you're just going to pummel right through these. Number one, the uppers. Number two, the exposed Cushlon. Number three, even with harder durometer rubber, you're going to start to wear through that tread pretty good too. But getting into the fit of the Tatum 3s, once again, unfortunately, confusion and bewilderment. Number one, they only have a 10-degree inflip. Not terrible. And the toe box taper is only 25 degrees, so a lot less than some other shoes. So there's actually a decent amount of room in the toe box. And the toe box, number one, it's not super like platypus foot straight, and it's not out flip. So I mean, it actually has to me, this is like the best combination of having that in flare for a little bit more ease of glide and ease of push off, but also not being so in flare that it kind of bunts up against you, right? Kind of abuts your lateral foot or just makes it uncomfortable. So honestly, the shape of the forefoot of this shoe and the transition from the midfoot to the forefoot, I actually think is fantastic. Now, the width of these comes in at 9 centimeters. Toe box width comes in at 10 centimeters. So nothing, earth-shattering. It's a pretty medium shoe. So I'd say a narrow and medium foot, you can go true to size. A 2E, it might be a mismatch because they do come a hair long, so you're going to have to get them up long. And if you're any bit bulky in the midfoot, it's a no-go. 4E, I think, is a no-go too. So this is more of a narrow and medium fit shoe. The problem is that no matter if you're a flat-footed person and the interior, there's the medial side rubber gasket gets you, or the lateral side ones. The lateral side ones are much more annoying because it's much harder rubber. The medial side they can get away with. It's going to be a no-go for a lot of people. You can put an orthotic in it, and that will help on the medial side and potentially a little bit on the lateral side. But it better be one with a higher arch or a more broad arch and a stronger shell so that you don't pummel through the shell. It's like a foam type orthotic or just like a, you know, something like that. That's not going to work. It better be A, carbon fiber, B, thicker polypropylene, something like that. Like think like Power Step Pinnacle Max, Power Step Pinnacle, right? Custom, you know, bulkier carbon fiber orthotic with a lot of padding on the top of it. And like I said, it better either have a medial arch platform or a medial flange on it, because it has to block out all these gaskets. If you can get that in there, then yeah, the containment's good. They are bottom light, and you will get some snap from the Cushlon and the 4-foot zoom air unit. But without that, I really couldn't recommend them for really any type of foot type, because they need a very specific type of augmentation, at least in my opinion, make them really comfortable for anybody, but a very slender, narrow foot that's light enough that's not going to feel any of those, you know, rubber gaskets underneath of the shoe, or someone that can comfortably put a bulkier orthotic in. The good part is that they will lock down a bulky orthotic, so that is kind of the silver lining there. But getting into the performance of the Tatum 3s, you know, when they were gripping okay, they're more flexible than you think they're going to be when you have them, when you first look at them. And yeah, I mean, they do have a decent amount of just, you know, light, quick pop to them. And they do feel very bottom light. That's the best part of them, is how bottom light they do feel. It's just with all this, you know, the Tatum 1, I actually think had something really going for it. It was interesting. I wish they would have pushed more down that line instead of like with a Tatum 2 where, yeah, it still is meant to be played up on the very distal tip of your foot. But, you know, I'd rather have the ground contact foam, right, than all of this different rubber and this inconsistency. That's the thing. It was just inconsistent. And so it was hard to really evaluate. I almost liked it more for pickleball because it was bottom light and airy feeling. And if I wasn't, you know, if I was just staying in one place and just kind of pivoting back and forth, I thought that they were better versus having to run, stop, try to stop hard, and just kind of dealing with that inconsistency. Yeah, I didn't slip out, and it wasn't, you know, it wasn't like some others where I really slipped out on them. Sometimes I'm sure you've seen that's happened on, you know, throughout the years, but it was just, I really wasn't going as hard either. And honestly, it was starting to affect my shot. I was starting to kind of push, and just because I just never felt comfortable underfoot just playing them recently, I just noticed, it was just kind of throwing my timing off because I just couldn't trust what was under my foot. So, yeah, you know, honestly, I would just love to see what they would have done with the ones and kind of going with that concept. Maybe Jason Tatum didn't like that feeling. Maybe that wasn't something, maybe he liked something like this more, which is great. Then it makes that a true signature shoe, right? Then that is interesting and that is cool. But I'd just like to see in the 4s, maybe just trying to dial in more of the consistency of the shoe, because from the 2s to the 3s, like I said, still just to me, pretty inconsistent playing. The 3 is definitely more buttery than the 2s, so that's good. But yeah, so I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, especially if you love the 2s. If you like the Tatum 2s, I'd love to hear in the comments down below. And if you're going to get these, I'd love to know kind of what your experience has been. So let me know in the comments down below. And if you do want to see Nike's other brand new release that just came out, the Jaw 2 Go Under the Knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.